you. I think we're about to get started here. Thank you all so much for being here today. My name is Emily Wilkins. I have the honor of being the 117th president of the National Press Club. Like all presidents of the club, I am a working journalist, so unfortunately, I'm going to be heading off once the panel begins, but you are in excellent hands here. We really have some fantastic folks today. And I just wanted to start off this event by sharing a few thoughts about Evan Gershkovich, who was the club's 2023 Obashan Press Freedom honoree. We all know about this time last year, the Russian government targeted, kidnapped, and jailed Evan. Evan was fully credentialed to be in Russia and reporting, and so their actions were jarring and unexpected. No American journalist has been held in Russia since the Cold War. And without Evan's reporting this past year, we have lost so much. We have lost insight into a country and a war where accurate information is desperately needed. And Evan is the kind of reporter who is uniquely able to tell us about Russia, its politics, and its people. In our democracy, each citizen must be informed to fully participate. Our method of government relies on public information by a free and independent press. And when Russia jailed Evan, they put a little piece of who we are in that cell with him. And we, the people, need him back. And his family needs him back. Yes, absolutely. His family needs him back. Russia's issue, it's not with Evan, and it's not with his family. And we call on Russia today to release Evan today. Send Evan home with Danielle and their parents. And let's be clear here. It is also the responsibility of the U.S. government to be bringing Evan home. And while today is about Evan, I cannot go without calling on our government to also bring home the two other wrongfully detained American journalists, Alsu Kumasheva and Austin Tice. President Biden, Secretary Blinken, and all whose job it is to protect U.S. citizens abroad and bring them home safe, you need to be doing better for journalists. Their families have the right to expect that their government will bring them home. I want to extend a sincere welcome and a deep appreciation for those who are with us on this difficult anniversary. Danielle, Evan's sister, thank you for being with us today and for telling your family's story. From the Wall Street Journal, thank you to Associate Editor Paul Beckett and Chief Counsel Jason Conti. You guys really have led the fight when it comes to getting Evan back, and we absolutely appreciate all of your efforts. And Jason Rezaian of the Washington Post, who was a 2015 Obashan honoree. He knows a thing or two about what it takes to bring a journalist home, and Jason, we're so grateful to have you here today. I'm going to turn this over to Bill McCarran. He's the National Press Club's press freedom consultant, and he has relentlessly worked behind the scenes to keep the pressure on the government to bring Evan and Austin and Alsu home. Now, Bill will be leading a moderated conversation with our panelists, and as always, we are taking your questions. Please write them on the cards provided, pass them to the front, and I speak from personal experience, but please do try and write as legibly as you can. And for everyone gathered here today and for watching, this is just the run-up to the one-year mark. And this is the time to make sure that Evan remains front and center in the minds of the American public and our government. The Wall Street Journal has some really great resources for social media to promote Evan and remind folks that what's happening is so unjust. And I believe that Paul is going to be talking a little bit more about that. We'll also encourage you that if you have your Evan pin, wear it. If you're a reporter and you have the chance to ask public officials what they're doing to bring Evan home, make sure that you're taking them up on that opportunity. Make sure that the U.S. government knows that we will not stop fighting for Evan's freedom and that all journalists held hostage must be a priority. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you for standing with Evan. And with that, I'll hand it over to Bill McCarran. Bill, thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks, Emily. Every year the press club elects a president, and you're never sure what you're going to get. And we've got a great one in Emily, and she's going to be fighting for journalists like Evan all year, so I'm glad of that. I thought we'd start by just going down the line and every one of us just take a swing at where are we now, 1 year in, and what are our thoughts, what are our feelings, and what are our hopes for the future. So I'd ask Jay, Conte, you just as a reminder as the chief counsel there at Dow Jones.
Well, thanks, Bill, and thanks to Emily and to the National Press Club for having us and for the support from you all and from the media, which has been tremendous for Evan. Today is day 358 of Evan's wrongful detention in Russia. Every day is a gut punch. We were here around day 100, and it just keeps growing. I think I describe it as lots of activity and not clear how much progress. We're in this long middle that we don't know exactly how long it's going to be. There will be a resolution at some point. It's not entirely clear how or when. That's the reality of it. In terms of the status of where things sit on the legal front, which I use as a phrase quite loosely, frankly, in the Russian legal system, they have this process of investigating, and that's the process that we've been in for the last year. As he's been wrongfully detained, every few months they ask for an extension to continue to investigate this alleged case of espionage. The last hearing was in January, which extended Evan's detention until the end of March 30th. So we expect there will be a hearing again. That hearing will likely be next week. I don't know a date. And there's kind of two potential paths at this point. Because it's been a full year of wrongful detention and investigating that's been going on, the investigators can either ask for an extension of that wrongful detention because there are extraordinary circumstances present, whatever those might be. Technically, they need to have extraordinary circumstances to go beyond a year of investigating. Or they may say that they're ready for trial, and then that process would kick in. Trial process involves the defense being able to review whatever evidence they've been able to collect to this point, and then most likely a transfer of both the case and Evan to Yekaterinburg, which is a city about 1,000 miles outside of Moscow, which is where Evan was arrested. And then in theory, there would be a trial of some length that we wouldn't really know anything about. It would be conducted in secret. It's an espionage trial, and there'd be very little information that would come out during that process. So we don't know which path it's going to be, but that hearing is next week, and then we'll have a better sense of exactly what the next steps are in terms of the legal process. In terms of the kind of efforts underlying all of this, nobody thinks that the legal route is the path to get Evan free. The conviction rate is 99+% in Russia. This is not a case where some amazing lawyer is going to swoop in and free him. We do have great lawyers on the ground in Russia. Really thankful to them, brave lawyers taking care of Evan and seeing to his case. They get to see him just about every week, which is amazing, and spend a fair amount of time with him, which is important because other than consular visits every 4 to 6 weeks, he isn't really able to see anybody else. And so those visits with his lawyers, whom he's grown to have a great relationship with, we're very appreciative of. But the legal case is not where this is going to get resolved. It's obviously going to get resolved in the diplomatic channels. And on that front, there has been a lot of activity. There have been a lot of conversations privately. There has been a lot of attention to Evan's case publicly. And that's in part thanks to Western journalists largely. There was a press conference in December where a question was asked and Evan came up. There was the Tucker Carlson interview in February, and then just recently post-election, a question from NBC News, I think it was, to Putin as well. In all of those instances, there has been an expressed willingness to do a trade of some sort, which simultaneously gives you two immediate feelings if you're in our position. One is, well, thank God there's at least interest to do a trade on the other side. And then, of course, immediately followed with how despicable that we're talking about doing a trade for a journalist who's doing their work and is a good, decent human being in exchange for somebody who's been convicted as a criminal in a foreign country. So it's quite a difficult business, this business of trading humans, but that's kind of where we are. There's at least a willingness on the Russian side, and so it's a matter of figuring out through diplomatic channels where that goes. Those are obviously government-to-government conversations. Our job is to try and, frankly, get in front of people as often as possible to try and make the case, and that's partly why we went to Davos with Daniel's parents, Ella and Mikhail. It's why they went to the State of the Union earlier this month. It has been a bipartisan effort in the U.S., which has been great to see. This is not a left or a right issue. This is a free press issue, which everybody can rally around. And there have been interests from foreign governments as well who have been helpful. So generally speaking, again, as I said, there's a lot of activity, but until there's actually something crystallizing, it's hard to know exactly how far down the path you are. But I'm gonna choose to be optimistic, perhaps cautiously optimistic, because I'm a lawyer, and that's a sort of a curse of the trade, I suppose. But I do think there's reason for optimism.
Thank you, Jay. Danielle, thoughts and feelings now in 1 year?
Well, as you may know, I'm Evan's sister, and I'm sure you can imagine this has been a really difficult year for our family. It's just a lot of uncertainty, and we just have to take it day by day. But out of standing here at 1 year, I've been reflecting a lot, and it's incredible to see this community of journalists rally around Evan. We're so grateful, and there's the international community as well. This concerns all of you. So we're just so appreciative that the journalist community is continuing to put the spotlight on Evan and share his story. That definitely gives us a lot of optimism. And of course, the incredible team at the Wall Street Journal has been just so amazing and supportive. We're just going to keep believing that we're going to get Evan home soon.
Thanks, Danielle. Thank you. Paul?
Thank you all for coming. It's very good to see you all. So why does 1 year matter in a way? I think the first is it's an opportunity for us to salute Evan and his family. We knew he was a great reporter. That's why we hired him. I don't think any of us realized quite what an extraordinary young man he is to have endured this ordeal with such extraordinary grace, and that goes for his family as well. So it's a moment for us to show our appreciation for him. I think also from a press freedom standpoint, you do realize what an extraordinary chilling effect it has to take one reporter. And I do think, certainly I've come to learn over the last year the extent to which an attack on one reporter's press freedom is an attack on all of our press freedoms that we all rely on every day to do our jobs, so we're relying on them right now to do our jobs. So that's definitely brought home, and you can see the chilling effect it's had on reporting out of Russia over the course of last year. So many, very understandably, Americans reporting in Russia withdrew. So many American news organizations withdrew, and they continue to do yeoman's work from outside of Russia, but Russia is such an important country that we've essentially been deprived of a year of vital reporting on a country that you know has had, is having, and will have an extraordinary impact on the future direction of the United States and the Western world. And I think it's probably a reason to gear up. We don't hit 1 year and think, oh, we've done what we can. It's a reminder that all that we've done hasn't yet paid the one dividend that we need it to. So we really need to re-up our efforts and go at it with an even greater sense of urgency to make sure that we can end this as soon as we possibly can. So this 1 year should be the start of something, not the end of it, and that's what we'll determine to do.
Thanks, Paul. Jason, 1 year in. Go ahead. I was going to ask you, say whatever you want, but I was going to ask you, what do we think's happening with Evan 1 year in? Can you remember 1 year in for your case?
I can. First, I want to echo everything that Jay and Danielle and Paul said. On this point of the chilling effect that it has on other journalists, we're now looking at 10 years almost since I was arrested, and you can see our ability to cover Iran has fallen off exponentially since then. And it wasn't just a drop off of a cliff, it was a slow decline. And we're seeing that happen in Russia and China and many other places. So this is important for all of journalism and for all democratic societies who need to know what's going on inside countries run by adversarial regimes. As far as what it looks like from where Evan's sitting, I think, to me, it's the deprivations that, unless you've been thrust into a situation like that, I don't think you can fully comprehend. A day off the grid.
Yeah.
Try it. See if you can get yourself off of the grid for a day. I don't think Evan's had access to the internet for a year. He hasn't had the ability to talk to people that know him, that care about him. That lack of access to information for me became very hard. I mean, we are so bombarded by the ability to communicate and access knowledge 24 hours a day. I mean, think of all the times that you've woken up in the middle of the night and gone to your phone and checked. Can't do that. That's not an option for Evan at this point. But he's also been deprived of being able to witness how people have stepped up for him, right? How his colleagues at the Wall Street Journal have mobilized, how other people in media, how his family, how Danielle has blossomed into one of the great hostage advocates of our times.
You're here.
Yeah. And I think, to me, when I read the recent piece in Time about Evan and his detention, I mean, I could have, if you'd taken Evan and Russia and, inverted it, it's a very similar set of experiences. I'm glad he has access to books. If he can access or ever hears about what we talk about today, I think enjoy that, because it's going to be the one thing that you don't have time to do, read for pleasure. And I think the thing that sticks out for me after a year was just that sense of hopelessness. Mm-hmm. And I hope that he gets the message that not only is there hope, not only will he come home, but there isn't going to be any good news until there's that good news, right? And it's a hard thing to internalize, but I hope he's able to do that.
Yeah, hope is such an important tool in this, and I think Daniel will talk about this a little bit later, but there is a little bit of knowledge on Evan's part that there are people out there working for him, and so this work is important in that respect, that it helps Evan's hope and buoys his himself and his family. And just picking up on a point that Jay made, that we know there'll be a conclusion at some point in the future. We don't know what that point is. I've had the opportunity to talk to Ella, Evan's mom, Danielle's mom. And one of the things that we say together is that we know he's coming home, and so each day is one day closer to that day he's coming home, even though it's an unknown point. And so that way it's a great day. And she's a remarkable person. She really takes this to heart, and we sort of tease each other a little bit about it. But this is really the most important thing for the family, for those close to him, and to the extent it can get through to Evan. So our efforts here really are important, even though we're not always seeing, an outcome. And so we call on all of you to be involved in that way. Just keeping this theme for a second, please, any of you, share with us anything that really surprised you in a positive way about this really terrible experience. So I don't know what that could be, but I found my thing. So Jay, do you want to, anything surprise you where you received some help or you received some, not good news, but just something that buoyed you?
Yeah, I mean, there have been a number of interesting elements of this that I wouldn't have expected. Getting to know Danielle and Ella and Mikhail, there would have been really no reason, I think, to do that, and they are truly remarkable, extremely strong people, and that's been a relationship that I valued, to be honest. I'm a lawyer at a media company. I love what I do, but this is a different kind of bond that you share, a different kind of effort where you're really trying to come together, and there's a real emotional and challenging element to that, which makes the work extremely meaningful. It's not like you're wondering, why am I doing any of this? You have this really important goal, and you're going to achieve it one day. So that relationship, I think, has been really unique. In addition, I think seeing sort of the media community rally around, we're all competing with one another in lots of different respects, but seeing a singularity of focus and a willingness to assist, both external as well as within our own company, has been truly remarkable. It does rally people together and does bring people together, kind of focused on a singular goal. So, it's hard to see the positives, but I do think it's a good exercise to sort of force yourself. And the other thing is, I haven't met Evan. I know his sister and his mom and dad really well now. He's a truly unbelievable guy from all that I've learned and all the things that they've said, and I really look forward to the day that I can meet him in person and be able to salute him in his courage.
Thank you. Danielle, you want to add anything there?
I look forward to that day too, when you guys get to meet the amazing person Evan is, and that's definitely one of the things that I hold on to every day, is just seeing how strong Evan is and how he still has a sense of humor. You can often see him in those courtroom photos, and he's smiling, which is just amazing. I'm just so proud of him. I'm really proud of my family. We've all managed to really support one another, face our fears, to be advocates for him. And I mentioned the community of journalists. I didn't realize what a tribal community it is. It's incredible, and meeting Evan's friends who are just doing everything they can to help. It's just amazing that it's this whole village that's risen up to help my brother.
Thank you. Paul?
I think, along similar lines, I think the response from, journalist community and journalism adjacent community, including the National Press Club, has been superb and very encouraging. I think at a personal level, I've spent a lot of time running reporters in dangerous places overseas and worrying about them, and there's nothing as visceral as having something like that actually take place. Mm-hmm. So I'm grizzled veteran status in this department at this point, and there's really from a professional perspective, there's before Evan and there's since Evan. And that's been quite a surprise, I guess, in how much it affects all of those who are working on it. I think the Journal Newsroom has responded very well. Evan is, as Jay said, I've never met him either, because we hired him in Moscow in early 2022. So he spent his time there and in Ukraine and in London. I don't even know that he spent time in the New York newsroom. Do you know? I don't know. So I don't. Anyway, he didn't come to DC. I was DC bureau chief. So very few of us on this side and in the Wall Street Journal newsroom writ large have actually met him, but the outpouring of support for him has been very impressive.
Thank you.
There was another similarity between my situation. Almost nobody, a handful of people at the Post had met me before this happened. I think we can't say enough about the camaraderie is one part of it, but alignment from the very first hours of Evan's detention between major news organizations, something that we almost never see in any kind of way. And I can remember very vividly speaking to one of Paul and Jay's journal colleagues that morning saying, I think that we can compete on headlines and, advertising and everything else, but this is not something that we can have any separation on. And I was so moved to see that the Post and the Times and the Journal came out so forcefully, so quickly. Bill, you put Paul and I in touch probably, I think, 3-4 days after Evan was arrested. We've come quite close in the last year. Very thankful for that, and for all that the Journal is doing on Evan's behalf, and that our newsroom and others are as well. It fortifies my hope, and I think retroactively makes me feel well taken care of way back when, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no. Thank you for that. Turn a second to something Jay was talking about, the difficulty of the bargain where a good journalist and a good person is traded for someone who has committed a crime, sometimes a very dastardly crime out in the world. Jason and Paul in particular, I'd like to hear from you on this. We've all said great things about the journalism community, and I amen all of that, but does the reporting bring too much of an emphasis to what the return is when we're trying to trade for a hostage? Is it disproportionate? Because there does seem to be an awful lot of focus on whether the deal was a good deal. Do we have something to learn about how we cover this stuff?
I think there's constantly things to learn about how we cover it, and that's something that I've been talking about publicly and privately with news editors, with people in the government, with friends and colleagues. First and foremost, how we frame those initial days and hours, and I think the Journal did a really good job of learning on the fly about how to cover this story. And I think that that's influenced how others have covered it. And to the point about what the trade is or what the outcome is, those things are fine to opine about. We don't know what the actual recipe will be. So I think it's a little bit irresponsible to say, well, it's this thing that the other guys want, and so we have to give them this thing, and then it'll all be over. But I also think that it's important to always just bring it back to the abuse of power that's being carried out against a fellow citizen because he is a citizen of this country. For me, the focus should always remain on that this is an atrocity, an outrage, an act of terror by U.S. and international law, if it were ever prosecuted, that needs to stop as soon as possible. In Evan's case, and in all other cases around the world. That's what I think the emphasis of reporting should be. Not to say that, the discussion of how it ends is irrelevant, but switching around the focus is, I think, still possible.
I think you've raised a very good point before, though. Also, at some point, we expect Evan will face trial. Right? And as Jay said, in that trial, given the nature of the system, we'd expect him to be convicted. We're going to all face, collectively, a journalistic challenge in how to properly transmit that to readers in a way that is reflects the reality of the situation and doesn't imply that he's actually been convicted of any crime as we would understand it. Right? So a headline Wall Street Journal reporter convicted of spying maybe in the context of the Russian court system, an accurate reflection of the fact on the day. I think it would be, everybody have to make their own decisions, but I would worry that that would be grossly misleading.
And I'll tell you, I mean, this is a conversation that I've had over and over and over again. And some of my own editors over the years have responded to me that, well, nobody actually believes that he is a spy. So, you have to realize that not everybody is informed about this story. Mm-hmm. When you read that headline, that might be the first time you're reading about Evan, right? So I think that there is a responsibility that we have, but also a possibility, an opportunity to do better. Mm-hmm. And, we're seeing that play out here in real time.
Jay, did you want anything on this?
I was just going to say it's a really good point, because the number of people who have said, well, could there be some truth? Like, come on, it's complete nonsense. But if you just graze the news as opposed to, inhale the news like a lot of us do, you don't really know, and your decision, your mind's made up in a really short period of time. So I think it's a great.
Well, and those headlines then get distilled down into even smaller sound bites, whether it's for, headlines on a talk radio, at the top of the hour. And these are the things that most people latch onto.
Yeah.
I would also say that the focus on what the return is in a hostage situation or a kidnapping situation is a cause of stasis for government. They won't say that, but it's in the back of the minds of government officials who are working on these problems. How is the outcome going to be viewed? How is this going to be covered in the press? And that's kind of the last thing that you want. These people have a lot of things to think about, and they have a big job to do. That's the last thing you want them dwelling on. So the overemphasis of how the trade was done, and like in past situations, even Jason's situation, there was all this examination of was it too much kind of thing. Well, I can tell you, it's not too much for Jason and his family, right? But just the reporting on this needs to evolve, I think, and I think it's good to have these kind of conversations so we can think about it before it's landing on the desk and we're trying to grapple with it.
You're making the Jason point on reporters in these kinds of scenarios. The U.S. has set up the SPIHA system, which is great. It's a great team. Evan was designated as wrongfully detained in 12 days, and that's very swift in the grand scheme of things. I think that's all wonderful. I think there's one element of this that I hope comes out of it, which is that in a scenario like this where a reporter is taken off the beat for just doing his job, wrongfully detained, there ought to be an immediate consequence from the government where he comes from, and a coalition of governments who care about a free press. Because right now, and Paul alluded to this, if you think about what are the consequences of what's happened so far, great reporter is sitting in prison, a number of Western journalists pulled out of Russia, it's much harder to cover the story from the ground, and eventually, if we believe the playbook on these things, Russia will get a bad guy back. What is the disincentive to do this again? Why wouldn't you continue to take hostages of good reporters if you're in an authoritarian country or a wannabe authoritarian country? And what you ultimately end up getting is reduced effective coverage of what you're up to in your own country and a bad guy back. The incentive is too high to not have that keep happening. So we've got to do better, frankly, on the U.S. side and for all coalition governments to send a message right at the beginning, whether that's sanctions. Listen, sanctions aren't perfect, but they do send a message. There is a point to them. There is a principle behind it. And for a country that cares and believes in a free press, we ought to put this front and center. If a reporter is taken and designated as wrongfully detained, there needs to be a consequence right away from the U.S. government. And I hope that's what we see going forward, because it didn't happen here, and it ought to happen in the future. And it can even be a snapback sanctions provision. You've taken our guy, these sanctions are being imposed. If you give him back, they will all be repealed. But we've got to get creative with some of this stuff. This principle is just too important to just let it happen in the way it's happened this time with zero consequence.
I think that's the headline right there. There is no good deal, right? There's no better or worse deal. And the deals don't incentivize more hostage taking. What incentivizes more hostage taking is that there are no consequences. Mm-hmm. If there were consequences, people wouldn't do this.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that what I'm going to say, is in agreement with what Jay just said, but for this case, for Evan's case, he's already declared unjustly detained. It was in record time, and applause to the government for moving at 13 days or whatever it was. In PR, 13 days is an enormous amount of time, and that is when some of the mindsets for people are established, for the public are established in that first period of time when they're paying attention. It's vitally important to me that even though 13 days was the record, it's not sufficient in my view. And so something like Jay's suggesting that there be some automatic move that the government or several governments in coalition could make when it's a journalist, and work out the circumstances on the back end. I mean, you can always remove the unjust detention if you want, but it should be known by other governments that the second you take a journalist, there will be some kind of consequences like the sanctions you're talking about, and also that we're going to immediately declare that this is unjust if they're a journalist that's there that's working. I don't think there's any reason to do it. And I talked to a number of reporters during these early days of cases where they'll say, well, the government hasn't said anything yet. The government hasn't declared, in Evan's case, the government hasn't declared unjust detention yet. It's like maybe there's something there. Well, there was nothing there. And that's us. We're who's waiting, right? So we've got to get out of our own way on this kind of stuff and figure it out in a more effective manner. Jason, you want to?
Yeah, I just want to say one thing. I mean, a lot is made in these cases. Well, the Russian or the Iranian or the Chinese legal system is different. You can't think about it in the same way as you think about all of that. May or may not be so. But what is so is that here in the United States of America, we believe in the presumption of innocence. And that is a core principle of our legal system. And when our nationals are detained abroad, yes, we cannot force other countries to adhere to that, but we can make clear that there is no there, right off the bat. And I think you're right, Bill. I mean, speeding up these designations or making a comment right away that, we know that this is, something is rotten here. Is the way to go about this right from the get-go, because those first days and hours are critical to framing how we talk about these cases.
Right, because the secretary is coming out and saying we know it's wrong before the government is designating that it's wrong.
Right.
And so it's a very hard mixed message, to sort. All that being said, we're coming up to this important day now for Evan and for the story and for his family. And I wanted to just ask Danielle to share, what's the family planning on the true anniversary, which is the 29th? And also for Paul, what's the team at the Journal doing in terms of organizing the troops? So can you guys go on that?
Sure. For the 29th, hoping we can all get together, my parents and I, and just, it's kind of those moments that are so nice when we can just laugh together. And I always have a smile when I'm talking about Evan, so that's what I'm hoping for.
We have a lot planned, and we'd love everybody's participation in helping us amplify it as we move into a big week next week. So some of the things, did your grandparents live in Brighton Beach?
Yes.
So we have organized, so we first of all thought about organizing a swim in Brighton Beach in the UK, which I think Evan had visited. It's not far from London, and Brighton Beach in Brooklyn, where his grandparents were. And then we thought, well, what other Brighton beaches? Turns out there are lots of Brighton beaches around the world, so some in warmer climes than others. So we have a swim going at Brighton beaches all over the world: New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, Canada, US and the UK. We will have, and this was actually something that we did early on here in DC at the National Press Club last year, we will have a 24-hour readathon of Evan's work from the 27th into the 28th, so Tuesday into Wednesday, with his Wall Street Journal colleagues, well-wishers from around the media and elsewhere. That will take place in New York, and the point of that is to read Evan's work and to show that, you know, one day is a long time, 365 days is an eternity for him. So that one we will be pushing that on social media as well. We have, was he a runner? Because we're doing a lot of running for him as well.
They did a bunch of running for me, and I'm not a runner.
You have to run in soccer too. So
Yeah.
Training.
We'll be taking to the streets all over to run for him next week again, just to do something in which the Journal Newsroom and other friends of Evan can participate to raise awareness for his one-year anniversary. And we will be having photos from Wall Street Journal bureaus around the world and other, I think, even here at National Press Club as well, for other Washington press folks who would like to join us. So there's lots of ways in which we just want to be very, very visible in what this means to us and mark the moment in as many ways as we can. In terms of what we would ask everyone to do, we do use the hashtag #IStandWithEvan as much as we can. So if you see an opportunity to amplify any interviews that we are doing, and Danielle and Evan's family have a lot, including, I'm sure, with some of the folks in this room over the next week, amplifying that would be very helpful. And we always just ask people to even just go on the Wall Street Journal's website, wsj.com/Evan. It's free. It's not behind a paywall, just to get to know him. Because we do think thinking about him, speaking about him, telling someone else about him, keeping his name in circulation is just vital, and will be vital going forward. 1 year, you know, as of March 30th, 1 year will have passed, and Evan will still be in prison. So that's, again, a moment where we want to make sure that we stay as loud as we can for as long as we have to until he comes out. So we appreciate all of it.
Thank you, Paul. I think it was Jay who mentioned the Tucker Carlson interview. Can we ask, were you surprised that Tucker Carlson in his last question mentions Evan? I guess what I'm asking is, and you can tell us or not tell us, did he talk to the Journal? Did he say he was going to do that? Any plans that you were aware of?
I was pleased he asked the question.
Yeah.
Because it was a good opportunity to get an answer, and I was more surprised by the answer itself.
Mm-hmm. In what way?
The asking of the question. He was much more direct than you've seen him be in the past. You know, he didn't say there's a judicial process, there needs to be a conviction, we need to go through it, all of that kind of stuff. It was a meandering answer that went through lots of different topics, including what he'd like to see in an exchange. So it was a more direct and forthright answer than I would have expected from him.
Do you think the Russian people saw that?
I think it was played all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I suspect they did.
Mm-hmm. And can you, maybe Paul's the one for this, but more broadly, what do we think Russian media, to the extent there is Russian media, and other media that can get into Russia, what do we think Russian people are hearing about Evan and about this case? I mean, obviously it's not getting a lot of attention.
I don't know. You may have a better idea. I don't know a huge amount about that. I do know, as the many in the Western press withdrew from Moscow to continue to report on Russia from Berlin, Tbilisi, Dubai, Warsaw, London, that a lot of what was left of the independent Russian media went with them. So, what does that leave in Russia? Probably by a process of deduction, you could get down to Russian state propaganda. So, what are the Russians hearing? Russian state propaganda.
Yep.
And I think a lot of the voices that would have brought the truth to a Russian audience have been forced to leave.
Thank you. The few questions from the audience here, and if you have questions, just feel free to pass them up.
I have a question, Bill.
Yes, sir.
I would love to hear from Danielle how Evan's doing.
Oh, yeah.
And what life
can you tell us?
for him at the
Please.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And to explain how you know this stuff. Yeah.
Oh, well, Evan and I write letters back and forth. So that's, it's about once a week, although I've been waiting about 2 weeks now for the most recent one. But we tend to keep it light in our letters. I think we're just mainly trying to support one another and make each other laugh. And I'm just in awe of him. I don't think any of us really know what it would be like to be in that position, but I don't know if I'd be smiling or so concerned. For International Women's Day, he arranged for my mom and I and some of his girlfriends to get flowers. So he's always thinking about us, worrying about us. That's his biggest concern, and we're concerned about him. So, yeah.
How's that been? You're writing, but you know that this is being read when it's going in, and you know what he's writing you is being reviewed. Is that part of your process? Have you just gone past that now, or how does that affect you?
I would say I've gone past it now. My Russian has really improved. He's noticed and told me that. And it's just, I just look forward to those letters so much, and I just tell him about my day. Recently I checked in with him about if it's okay for me to watch the Dune sequel, because he saw the first one. I feel really guilty about seeing the second one, so I'm waiting for a response. Yeah, it feels like we're just talking to one another. I've definitely got past the fear of what other people might be reading.
Thanks. This question asks, how has Alexei Navalny's death impacted your outlook on this case, and does it complicate a possible deal? I'm not sure who that's for, but as far as the deal part, maybe you want to take it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we follow every development that happens in Russia. They all have an impact, right, as would be the case of a death of someone like Navalny. I think the immediate thing that it makes you think is, there's danger to political prisoners in Russia, and we have a political prisoner in Russia. We have no reason to believe he's in any actual danger, but it just creates a further sense of urgency of we need him home as quickly as possible, and that puts further pressure on the U.S. government and everybody else to do what's necessary in order to bring them home. So all of the developments that are large like that in Russia certainly have an effect on the dynamics of a deal and then bringing Evan home. But we're hoping to be able to find a path forward.
So this question, thank you. This question broadly asks a similar thing, but with respect to the case of Alsu Kermashiva and I suppose you could say Paul Whelan. Do these detentions complicate or simplify the negotiation process, to free Evan? I know there's some coordination that people talk, families talk to each other, and I know everybody wants each person to be freed, and that. I don't know how you want to touch on that at all. How does it complicate things? I would say that one thing is that it widens the understanding that this is a practice that Russia is engaging in, and in that way, maybe helps create focus, for our government, because this is it's a terrible problem with respect to any individual person, but it's a collective problem here. And it kind of shows the points Jason was making, that there's a strategy, and that this is a strategy without consequences. And it hastens the need for policymakers and government in particular, to become more adept at figuring out how to develop consequences in these cases. Did you want to say anything else about that?
I just say the stockpiling of humans for trading purposes is a despicable act. There's no question about it, and that's what we're seeing. Heart goes out to all the families who are affected by this. Paul has passed the 5-year mark in prison, which is a terrible thing to think about. Alsu's family is suffering as well. This is clearly a key element of an authoritarian's playbook. And as I said before, there haven't been any consequences for it. There still haven't been any consequences for it directly related to this. So let's create some consequences, and let's think about how we can get creative here. But in the meantime, put a package together. Bring these folks home.
You had mentioned one of the values, or one of the good outcomes is the bipartisan nature of the support Evan is receiving. Do any of you want to single out people who you think have been particularly strong on one side or the other in helping with this?
Yeah, listen, particular kudos to Jake Sullivan in the White House, who's been extremely helpful, very knowledgeable, obviously a very talented individual. He's been very useful. Speaker Johnson invited the parents to State of the Union. Really appreciated that. Chairman McCall has been extremely supportive. Senator Coons has been very supportive. So, as I say, there have been people on both sides who have stepped up. This is one of those issues that everybody can get behind and understands, kind of on a visceral level, as somebody mentioned, that this is just a wrong that needs to be corrected. So, and there are others, but those are just a few that kind of stand out as I sit here.
I think when we were talking earlier about getting the facts out, and it was very helpful to us that Senator Mark Warner, as the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, came out very publicly early on and said Evan is not a spy. And because that was something that we faced very early on. Obviously, the Russians, and when they confirmed that they had him, immediately accused him of espionage, and it was vital for us to counter that falsehood in his participation, as along with the White House, which was also quick to very publicly condemn it and deny it. Those are important moments for us in the early going.
We've also seen a House resolution that passed overwhelmingly, unanimously, I think it actually was, and Senator Schumer and McConnell have come out in a joint statement in the past, and so there has been a lot of that kind of bipartisanship, which we've really greatly appreciated.
Yep. So you had mentioned too, where one of the potential outcomes here is a trial, right? And looking down at Jason, who went through a trial and had a government bring its case, such as it was, to court, which were some emails, some, parking tickets. There were no documents. It was not a trial.
These are not trials. We shouldn't call them trials. Yes, it's a supposed trial, but it's not what you think of as a trial. It's innuendo and allegation and grandstanding without the opportunity to defend yourself or present evidence on your own behalf. So I want to caution people to not think of it as something that we are familiar with, and it's an incredibly frustrating thing to be subjected to. But I also, I think back to that image of Evan in the courtroom, with the kind of smug smile on his face, and people reached out to me saying, isn't this going to make things worse for him? Aren't they going to get angry? I said, let them get angry. Right? All he has right now is his ability to maintain some perspective, hopefully a sense of humor, and ultimately some grace. And he's been doing that admirably. And I think if and when he goes to court, he'll continue to do that. And I'll be applauding him from afar.
I will say there's been an element of humor that has run through this that I've really saluted. Evan likes comedy. Your dad likes comedy.
Yes.
And when they saw him in the courtroom, there was a lot of laughter, which is not the kind of thing that you would expect, but it's the ultimate antidote to what's going on here.
You have
so I
to
applaud that. That's
yeah, no,
amazing.
you have to diffuse the farce and point it back to them. And I was really glad to see that that's his approach, because that's not the approach that everybody takes.
So we're coming to the end of our time here, and I just wanted to say that, all of us, our hearts can be with the family, Evan's family, on the 29th. We can actually do some things that the Wall Street Journal is leading us to do in terms of public outreach on or around that date. Those of you in journalism, on your stories, we've offered some suggestions on the edges that may help serve as guidance in reporting. I would make this point that when Evan was taken a year ago, he was the second American hostage taken, Austin Tyson, Evan, and now we have a third in a short period of time, and it's a lot for the government to manage these cases. We also have hostages in Gaza. I see our colleague here from Al Jazeera, Abdul Fakkar, and our hearts go out to the reporters in the Gaza who are working for Al Jazeera. Some of them have been killed, some of them have been held, and all around the world. I think they have several reporters who've been held many years in Egypt. These problems will not go away. They're with us, and while we had a good talk today about methods, our talk is insufficient at this point. So we must do more. We have learned a great deal in this case, in Evan's case. We've come a long way since Jason's case in terms of understanding. But we're not there yet as a society, as a government, and as a profession. We're not to the point that we need to be effective. And so I greatly appreciate everything everyone in this room has done, everything anyone on this panel has done. And I go back to what Paul said. We have to redouble. We have to go forward, and we have to do significantly more. If we can do it with a little humor and a little lightness, yes, but stay the fight, redouble, come back and see us. We appreciate you. Thank you.